Hello from wherever you are, and welcome to Let's Play Games. I'm John McFarland, Adult Services Librarian for Nashville Public Libraries, and I hope you'll join me in learning or rediscovering some of the more common and uncommon games out there. This time, we go into one of my all-time favorite games, and one of the most competitive, collaborative, cooperative, and combative games that I'm familiar with. Settlers of Catan. Let's get stuck in. Settlers of Catan is a relatively straightforward game. I went ahead and set up the board, and we can take this piece by piece. It looks more composing than it actually is. Our goal in this game is to get to 10 victory points. How do you get to victory points? You do it by building on this small island, the island of Catan. How do you build things? You collect resources. So we have 5 different types of resources here. We have wheat, we have wood, we have sheep, so it's a little pasture farmland, but it's sheep. Brick, which is sort of like a hillside, and ore. Some people will call it metal, some people call it mountain tile, or some people even call it rock. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to refer to it as ore. Notice on this little board here, we have a wide array of tiles of all differing types, including this, the desert. The desert tile amounts to nothing but barren wasteland. And you notice that there's a little piece here. I'll get to that in a minute. This game is primarily done through dice rolls. And as you roll dice, so I'll go ahead and roll here a second. Whoop. I rolled a 5. You, as a player, are going to start off with 2 of these settlements and 2 roads. So you start off with 2 victory points right out of the get-go. You only need 8 more. Here's where it increases. So we're going to look at to where each person is, and the little apex part is what matters here. So at any point where a player has a 5 on these little dots here, they get that resource corresponding. So for example, blue here, he has a 5 on the ore, which means they will get 1 ore card. This is one of those games where you actually don't have the drawing cards hidden. This is just simple resource collection here. Meanwhile, up here, we have a 5, so the red player will get a brick. Notice that no other places have a 5, and once we roll again, let's try and go for a number that no one's at. 10, which would be the same bit here. Eventually we will roll to that point. Notice how so far with the way I've been playing, every single time I've rolled so far, somebody would get a resource, including 4, which is a relatively rare roll. Each has their own respective probability, and it is in rough order. So almost all of the numbers here have at least some level of coverage, but notice how this 2 right here only has the 1 attached to it. So say this person hadn't placed it here. With the 2, no one would get the resource. Happens. But notice in that dozen rolls or so, from a probability standpoint, someone's going to get a card. You may not get one every turn. Matter of fact, you're more than likely to not get one every turn. Just because I have, on green here, I've got 9, 10, 4, 8. So only 4 out of the 12 numbers will I get a resource card. I'm trying to see if anybody has pure... Yes, so the red player here has 9, 11, 6, 5, 4. So on 5 out of 12 rolls, they will get at least one resource. Now, the roll of 7. Numerically, 7 is the most common, therefore will occur most frequently. So what will happen is this robber, whoever rolls that 7, so let's say it was the green player that rolled it, they're going to decide one place to put this robber piece. So it'll move away from the desert. And you are wanting to place it somewhere where your opponents are that you aren't. So let's say I decide to place it here. 6 is one of the most common rolls after 8. So next go around, if I roll a 6, no one will collect the wood resources out of this. So it's a simple dice roll, collect resources, and build upon those resources. What can we build? We can build roads, which require simply wood and brick. So similar to how you would build any sort of road, you need brick along the bottom of it and wood to help with like the sides and stabilizing. A settlement, which would require wood, brick, wheat to think about like the increased population, and sheep for warmth and for a little bit of economy. A city requires a bit more stability, so you would need more food, hence more wheat is required, and build a little bit higher and more condensed. The ore. So everything works relatively in line with how it would work historically as you're trying to develop further and further. A settlement is worth 1 victory point on its own, hence the starting with 2. And each player has 15 of these little lines here. Those are roads. These little small home-looking bits are settlements. And then these with the small tower on them are cities. Cities are actually worth 2 victory points. And yes, you can replace a settlement with a city and upgrade it. What would be the point of doing so? The reason why is because you would then get 2 resource rather than 1 resource every time it's rolled. So next time an 8 gets rolled, rather than getting 1 wheat resource, you would get 2 wheat resources. It drastically increases the scale and allows you to build things faster because everyone else is trying to build just as often as you. Another couple quick things to note. With the rolling of the 7, I'll move back to that for a second. The number of resources you have in your hand matters. You don't want to hoard resources. You want to build your own things, especially because if someone rolls a 7, which is statistically the most common roll to have, 6, 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, all equal 7, so fairly high probability it's going to happen. Every time a 7's rolled, the robber gets moved. And if you have more than 7 resources, you have to discard half. So you could have 12 resources and be ready to lay fields. But if you roll a 7 or your opponent rolls a 7, yes, this includes you rolling a 7. You're not immune to it. You can only do things after the roll. You would lose 6 of those resources. So all of those things you had been building up towards to try and play on one magical turn, flipped in the blink of an eye, gets moved over here. Now the ore would be blocked and the wood is available again. So that is the element of strategy of this game, is getting resources as fast as possible to get towards those 10 points. Let me take a step back and tell you a little bit of history about this game, and then I can expand a bit on these special cards right here, development cards. One sec. So a little bit about the history of this game. It was developed in the early 90s by Klaus Teuber, whose name is exactly on the cover, and who is a German game maker who used to be a dental hygienist, doing a slight career change. There is an international recognized competition called Spiel des Jahres, the game of the year in Germany. And funnily enough, this game won in the year 1995. The extra fun part? This was not his first win. It was his 4th win. So, this was developed over a longer period of time by one of the more experienced game makers out there. That's why this is such a well-balanced, defined, and competitive game. So, I promised to talk about the development cards. The development cards will have some willful suspension of disbelief is what's required here compared to the literal interpretation I'm making for settlements, cities, and roads. Development card takes a sheep, a wheat, and an ore. And it'll be one of these cards that'll be outlined here with the little shield. It's got a couple of what I'm going to refer to as boons. So first off is the knight card. The knight allows you to, on your turn, move the robber to whatever space you want. You can also steal a resource. So let's say, we'll move things here. I'm the green player, and I have a knight to play. On my turn, I can play this card, and I move it over here. Then I would choose between the red and brown player, and they would proffer their cards, just hold them face down, and I could steal one of theirs. Why would these development cards be important? Well, first off, we have some special conditions. We've got largest army. It takes a minimum of 3. But if you play 3 knights, you actually get 2 victory points on your own. So it can be an important strategy to find ways to get development cards as fast as possible. Now, looking at the board, I also want to use roads because I cannot build a settlement unless it's connected to a road somewhere along the way. So notice for green here, I'm not connected. I need 2 more to be connected together. One important thing about building, you cannot build adjacent. So for example, this intersection of 3, 4, 9 can't be built on because there's something next to it. Same for this 3, 4, and 8. There is something next to it. So you have to find the intersections that no one else is at. So notice that this 3, 11, 10 is technically speaking available. Blue could build 1 road and then 1 settlement and take it over here, and they would then, let's go ahead and put that on there for demonstration's sake. Instead of being limited to 8, 5, 10 to 6, they would get something on 11, 3, 8, 10, 5, 2, 6. So it increases the chance of you getting a resource, how you get a resource, and in what ways you get resources. Now, an important thing to think about is notice on the outskirts, we've got these little ship designs. If you have a settlement built here, you can actually trade with basically the bank, as it were, for a resource exchange. Typically, if you aren't connected to any of these, the resource is 4 to 1. So say that I had 4 wheat and I needed a brick. I could trade with the bank, turn in 4 wheat, and then get 1 brick out of it. So if you have too much of a resource and you're trying to limit how much you could potentially lose and make sure you don't lose anything with the robber, you would be able to trade in. However, let's notice green player right here has a 3 to 1 ship with a question mark. So instead of it being 4 to 1 on anything, it would be 3 to 1 on anything. So it would be a nice advantage, which is why it might not be a bad idea to place something there, because for example, notice 8 and 9 respectively have wheat. If I'm doing really well with those rolls, I can actually potentially trade in faster. Also notice these other ships across the board have some exchange rates of 2 to 1. So right here, there's actually a wood 2 to 1, and this player, the blue one, has both the ship connected and the actual resource connected. So for every 2 times they get wood, they can trade that in. It doesn't work for anything else. It's 4 to 1 on everything else. So it's a simple trade game, but it's also intended to be as collaborative as possible. So your other players on your turn, you are allowed to trade resources. You can ask, hey, does anyone have wheat they'd be willing to trade? Say you need wheat, just 1 wheat to build a city. So you already have 1 wheat and 3 ore, and you just need that last wheat. If someone's willing to trade for you, they may say, okay, I will trade you a wheat for an ore, or a wheat for a brick, or even a wheat for 2 brick. There is no rule of like trade limits aside from hey, you have to trade on your turn. Aside from that, everything else is a collaborative effort where you're encouraged, and it's essential to actually trade with other players. You can't go through a whole game without trading to another player. So, about these development cards, I've got just a little bit more. First off, we also have victory points. These are individual points you keep hidden. So as a development card, you would hold these hidden until you're ready to go. And you would hold on to these to the end. So say you had 9 points out on the field and people think you need 1 more point. You have one of these in your hand, game's over. Also, these boon cards right here. We've got Year of Plenty, of which there are 3. You can take any 2 resources from the bank and add them to your hand. They can be 2 of the same resource or 2 different resources. So say that you need 2 wheat and you already have 3 ore to make a city. If you had this card in your hands, all right, give me 2 wheat. Oh, hey, look, I can make a city now. A monopoly, which you have to announce a particular type of resource. And all players must give you all of their copies of that resource. So say I decided as the green player, because ore is something I'm limited by, I don't have any connection there. I say, all right, everybody hand me all of your ore. You are compelled to handle all of your ore. The last one is road building. You get 2 free roads to place wherever you want. So simple as that. And these will be the only face down cards in the entire game. And typically for a game, we'll get it shuffled up. Speaking of roads, I had mentioned the largest army being 2 victory points. The longest road is also 2 victory points. You need 5 or more. You also don't have ties, so getting it first is what matters because somebody has to have more than you. So if they get to 5, they don't take it away. They have to get 6 to take it away from you. So it can be a fun little competition to try and get as many points as possible as fast as possible. So take a step back, give you a little bit more history about the game, and then we'll go through kind of the first couple of turns here just to demonstrate how you are starting to build some of these resources and play to win the game. So what makes this game in particular different from other games out there? This is a European style board game. This is a particular genre. And it's quite different than some of the other common board games out there that are more American style. Think of games like Monopoly. The entire premise is to bankrupt your opponents. Think of the game Sorry, where you're supposed to beat your opponents to a certain goal. European-style board games, it's sometimes also called German-style board games, are intended to be more collaborative and social. And as you're already seeing, you can't win without help from your opponents. You are working together to, yes, you're still playing a competitive element, but notice during this game, no one gets eliminated. No one is ever completely 100% out of it. You may be almost certain to lose. However, it's never going to be where you're suddenly completely out of the game compared to other style games. So that's what makes this a popular game and a bit more of a positive connotation where you still are going to be involved in the process no matter where you finish. Welcome back. So let's go over the starting positions. If this looks a little difficult to set up. I promise you it's not. It is in the user guide that this is the standard traditional setup. So I would use this as a starting point as you play through the couple of first times and get more familiar with resource generation and building victory points and winning the game. So notice that this is a very collaborative game where you have to trade with partners, and it's important to notice with your placement of how are you going to get to 10 points. So let's start with green. Green has this 3-to-1 trade. They've got 2 wheat, they've got no brick, they've got no ore, they've got a 4 and a 10. So notice these pips below each respective number. That gives you the probability and value of that little intersection spot. So kind of a cruddy one would be like this 3, 11, 10, a 2, a 2, and a 3. There's not a lot of opportunity for this to prop up unless somebody rolls a 1 or a 2, 2 or a 1, a 5 and a 6, a 6 and a 5, and 10 at least shows up a little more often with combinations like 6, 4, 5, 5. So green here is probably going to be looking for wheat in abundance and be able to trade it in to cover for their lack of production. And just kind of looking at the board, notice that when a settlement is built somewhere, it's at this intersection and you cannot build around it. So you're laying claim to that spot for the rest of the game. So for example, green could not build here because it's 1 bit tile away, and they couldn't build around, so they will have to figure out how to connect their respective roads. Now in theory, red could decide to build 1, 2, 3, 4 to connect their roads and block green from moving unless they go all the way around either. So you can play fairly competitively to try and block your opponents and hem them in. And the more road space you have, the more likely it is you're going to be able to place a settlement. So for green, I'm hoping for a lot of 8 and 9s and being able to trade in for things until I can get to, let's see here. This brick wouldn't be helpful. You're kind of stuck in here that eventually maybe you'll have to go to this 3-8 combination to at least get some lucky rolls. 6 is all blacked out over here, and green's not going to be able to get around. So they're probably going to go for this 3-8 right here if they're going to do anything at all. And then you really want to get this 9, 5, 12 to get yourself a somewhat steady supply of brick. And I'm sure you're then wondering, well, you already have 1 on the 9. What happens there? If you had a settlement here, you would actually get 2 wheat on a roll of 9. If you had a city combination, you would get 3. And notice you could still build something yet here, so you could get up to maximum of 6 on a roll. Not bad, right? So if I upgrade to a city on one of these after I built it, that 3-to-1 becomes a whole lot more feasible. Every time I roll a 9, I could trade in a number whenever I wanted to. So moving on to the brown player, they're a bit more spaced out. They're probably not going to win longest road unless they can quickly snake through up here. But even then, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 road pieces to get all the way down. And blue can stop that in 2. Red could technically stop that in 2 if they really wanted to. One of the elements about longest road that's important is we go by the longest stretch. So if there is a fork in the road, the fork doesn't count for 2. It only goes for 1, whichever ends up being longer. So they've got some decent wood generation, 6 and 11. They got 4 and 6, so brick and ore, they're going to be fine. They are not generating right now any wheat. This is where the collaborative comes into play. Green is going to be swimming in wheat. Meanwhile, over here, brown is going to be potentially loaded with wood. So everybody has a special-ish area that they're going to have to work towards. Red is going to be in the smack dab center and is, I believe, just double checking myself, one of the two players that has all that they can generate through. But they're pretty much landlocked. They're going to have to find a way to try and get to maybe up here for the 2-to-1 sheep, or over here with the 3-to-1 little settlement right here. But they, in theory, with some really lucky dice rolls, especially with that 11 sitting there, would be able to, with the 2 settlements, get 2 for every roll of 11. Doesn't happen super often, but it at least helps mitigate somewhat. They're probably hoping for a little bit of help with the brown player here with the wood, just so they can build roads a little bit faster. So moving last to the blue player, they also have the all 5 wheat generation, but that's where it's weakest. It's a 2, which means that only Snake Eyes will get you 1 resource. But in the meantime, they get the 6 of wood, and they're sitting right on the 2-to-1 wood generation from the get-go. So each player has their own respective strengths and what they're going to try and do to win the game. So I'll start as green. Oh look, the 2 right out of the gate, even though I had mentioned it being among the least likely. So blue would be getting 1 wheat. I can't do anything else with my turn. Don't have any resources to hand. And the way this normally would work, we didn't figure out what the placement was. At the beginning of the game, you would get a little bit to get at least basically started. So whatever your second placement was, that's going to be the 1 resource set that you get. So say that you placed this one as your second, right? You would get a wheat, a wood, and a sheep. If this was your second placement, you would just get a wheat and a sheep, just to at least start off. So we'll just go ahead and do that for the sake of making it a little easier on our souls. We'll say that wood, brick, and ore. We'll say sheep, wheat, and wood for red. And for blue, we'll give them ore, brick, and sheep. So, in theory, notice with the card generation they have, they're actually 1 away from the ability to build a settlement. They just need a wood. But they also currently don't have any place to settle that is free. You would need to build 1 or 2 roads to find some clear space. You're probably going to go for this 3, 10, 11 spot, or move up here to try and get this spot over here and maybe go for the sheep. In theory, a good strategy for red right here is if you could get 1, 2, build your settlement there, and then 1, 2, build a settlement there, you could be using that 2-for-1 sheep generation to really rake it in. Can't do anything else with my turn to build, so we're gonna move on. 7 roll, and it's early game. No one has any resource enough to be 8. So they're gonna choose, okay, who do I want to make sure doesn't get any resources for a bit? You'd like to get multiple players if at all possible. So let's do this 4 right here. You're still gonna pick 1 player to give resources up to, and you'll be able to see who has what in terms of number of cards. So if I'm this brown player, I want to say, okay, red, you have more cards. I'm gonna flip them upside down or just some presentation way to be like, hey, you get to pick a card. So we'll do, I know people who will just shuffle their cards all the time. They'll pick one. They get the wheat. So from here, you get to determine what you want to do. I'm noticing that I have the ability to build a road. So where do I want to build to is the good question here. So I'm going to take one of my roads, and I'm going to try and build this way. This is going to be a nice little competitive spot. It would get me a bit more of the sheep generation, and if I'm giving up on longest road, I could still get connected all the way to the pier and be able to trade everything off. So from there, that would be the end of my turn. It'd be red. 11. So this is where we repeat the process. Red would get 2 of the wheat. So hey, they got it back. And brown would get 1 of the wood. Don't think I see anything else. What do they have in their hand here? They don't have anything to trade. They don't have anything they can necessarily do yet. So they'll allow it to move on. This will be blue's turn. 10. So green would get 2 sheep right there. Blue would get a sheep. And can't do anything else right now. They could say, hey, does anyone want to trade a wood? Because I have a sheep and an ore to give up, or say, hey, I want wood. Is anyone willing to trade? I'm willing to give up a sheep. Someone could say no. Well, what about an ore? Somebody looks at it, nope. They're possibly going to go for a city because they've already got some of that resource generation. So say, okay, fine, I'll trade it with you. They'll trade, and then play continues onward and upward. In theory, they could also build a road right now if they wanted to. So let's say they did decide to do that for the sake of conversation. And they would get to build, which direction am I going to go here? See if I can connect through these two. Because you know that the brown player is going to be going for that same spot. Try and get there first. That's the key element. So play will continue onward and onward and onward with resource generation until somebody can get all the way to 10 victory points. So I talked previously about an American style game. What makes it different than our European style game? One of the key elements that we think about is instead of it being there's still luck and there's still chance involved based on the dice rolls, but there are some predetermined probabilities that are involved here within Catan. Compared to American style games, and I'll use Monopoly again as a perfect example, this is a chance-based. This is a luck-based as to what you roll and where you are on the board. It's inherently competitive nature. Notice even the knight, or the robber usage here, is probably the most offensive bit you have here in the game, aside from strategic road blocking. Here, you're using it to just temporarily prevent something from happening, and you could use it to your advantage. Compared to American-style games where that would be used to significantly debilitate somebody in much more in attacking style. So it's a different comparative style of game, and we've covered both types here on this series. But this one is probably the most preeminent example of a European-style board game. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Join me next time as we up the difficulty a bit and go through some of the more nuances of the game, because there is so much left to learn about the fun strategy. Also, this island is not just built for 4. I'll see you next time.